Welcome back to another explainer. Now, I want you to just picture a world for a second, long before TV commercials were interrupting your favorite shows, way before massive billboards were, lining every single highway, and definitely long before social media ads were tracking your every click online. Crazy to think about, right? But here's the thing. Even in that world, people still desperately needed a way to sell their products. So today, we're going to trace the fascinating history of advertising and see exactly how selling evolved.
Okay, let's dive into this. Thousands of years ago, merchants faced a really simple but honestly super profound problem. How do you convince complete strangers to buy from you instead of, say, the competitor in the stall literally right next door? I mean, it's the absolute foundational question of all commerce, isn't it?
Well, at first, the answer was stunningly simple, and frankly, completely low-tech. They shouted, seriously. In these busy, bustling ancient cities, merchants would literally just stand in the markets, calling out to anyone walking by. Basically, whoever had the strongest lungs usually won the sale. They just used their vocal cords to describe their fresh goods, trying to do absolutely everything humanly possible to attract attention over all that crowd noise. And boom, right there. That was one of the absolute earliest forms of advertising.
But, as civilizations grew and human settlements really started to expand, these sellers quickly realized that shouting just wasn't going to cut it anymore. They desperately needed a way to reach way more people than just the folks standing within earshot. So let's actually trace how the scale of reaching potential buyers evolved as our societies got more and more complex. Over in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, merchants got pretty creative. They adapted. They actually started using signs, specific symbols, and even written announcements to visually promote their businesses. Some of the really ambitious sellers even went as far as painting messages directly onto public walls to advertise their stuff, products, services, or, upcoming local events. It was essentially the ancient equivalent of a street poster.
Then we hit a massive turning point, a dramatic shift. The 15th century fundamentally transformed how human beings distributed information and, by extension, how we advertised. And it was all thanks to one monumental invention. Yep, the printing press.
Because of the printing press, for the very first time in human history, businesses could crank out large numbers of advertisements fast, and they could do it cheap, which meant they could suddenly reach thousands of potential customers all at once. We're talking printed posters, flyers, and eventually newspapers. This allowed sellers to scale up their messaging with this incredible efficiency that the ancient world couldn't have even fathomed. But as time marched on, right into the Industrial Revolution, industries just exploded, and market competition absolutely skyrocketed. Suddenly, factories were producing way more goods than ever before. And because of this massive boom in mass production, businesses were faced with a brand new challenge. It wasn't about how to make products anymore. The real problem was how to handle these massive, towering inventories and, more importantly, how to actually persuade people to buy them. This right here created a fundamental, totally psychological pivot in how we sell. The sheer pressure of mass production basically forced advertising to change its entire DNA. Instead of just informing people with basic facts, like, hey, I have shoes to sell, advertising shifted to actively influencing decisions. It became all about convincing the buyer exactly why they needed these specific shoes. To win this newly emerged, super competitive battle for consumer choice, companies had to build entirely new creative tools. They started crafting catchy slogans that would just stick in your head long after you read them. They designed memorable logos you could instantly recognize from a mile away. And they engineered these highly persuasive messages that were specifically designed to drive action. Fast forward to the 20th century, and radio and television transformed advertising all over again. I mean, talk about a massive leap in audience reach. Businesses weren't just leaving a printed flyer in a town square hoping to reach a few thousand people anymore. No, they could now speak directly to millions of people simultaneously, right inside the comfort of their own living rooms. It was a total game changer.
And then, of course, came the internet. This ushered in the era of online advertising, which gave companies this completely unprecedented power to hyper-target their messaging. So it wasn't just about shouting a message to millions of random people and hoping for the best anymore. It was about reaching highly specific audiences based exactly on their personal interests and their specific online behavior. This hyper-targeting created the vast, kind of overwhelming digital landscape we navigate today. I mean, advertisements appear almost everywhere now, don't they? They're integrated into the websites we read, they play before the videos we watch, they're embedded right inside our mobile apps, and they're injected directly into our endless social media feeds. Ads have literally become this omnipresent layer over basically all our daily tech usage.
But here is the really fascinating part. Despite all of this incredible technological advancement, from the printing press to modern, highly complex internet algorithms, advertising still follows the exact same basic goal it had thousands of years ago: getting people's attention and convincing them to choose one product over another. That ancient merchant physically shouting in a dusty market and the modern tech giant running a super-targeted behavioral ad, they're playing the exact same game. Which leaves us with a pretty wild thought. As our technology inevitably continues to evolve into things like virtual reality and AI, how are the merchants of tomorrow going to manage to shout your name?